Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Today we're going to talk about a historical contract. I've mentioned before, I wrote a book about Preston Tucker, the man who built the Tucker automobile back in the day. Book is called Preston Tucker and His Battle to Build a Car of Tomorrow. But here's the thing. This year is the 75th anniversary of the production car being launched 75 years ago. 1001 rolled down the assembly line. Not talking about the prototype, we're talking about the actual first production car 75 years ago. And so that's a pretty big deal. And I was talking to my friends in the community about this, and a few things going on. One of which is a big event at the AACA Museum in Hershey, Pennsylvania. And other people have noticed it too, like the Haggerty Drivers Club has got a really cool article in there about Tucker. Very, very lengthy article, which is pretty cool. But I was talking to some people in the know, and I know some of the people who are relatives of Preston Tucker. And I also know people in the Tucker Club of America, Automobile Club of America. And I said, I'm curious about the movie, Tucker, the Man and His Dream. And I actually just watched it the other night. And I'd heard that the family had worked with Francis Ford Coppola about the making of that movie. And I've always been curious to know, what does it mean to work with somebody about a movie? And so somebody said, well, I can get you a copy of the contract that was signed by the family members with Coppola's production company. And you can actually see what such a contract looks like. And so I actually have a copy of it in my hand right here. And this is fascinating to me because what happened was Francis Ford Coppola had heard the story of Tucker. His father had attempted to buy a Tucker automobile. And when the company fell apart, Francis asked his father, are you disappointed? You lost some money there. And Francis Ford Coppola said, his dad said, no, I respect the man for trying. It's so important that people try, even if they fail, that I respect him so much for trying that I'm willing to write that off as just a loss, no big deal. And so in later years, of course, Francis Ford Coppola then decided to make a movie about Tucker, and then apparently connected up with members of the Tucker family, because Preston Tucker's no longer around, and wanted to have the right to do this. Now, here's the thing, and this is important to remember. Preston Tucker was a public figure. Francis Ford Coppola could have simply said, I'm making a movie about the guy. No one can stop me. And that happens all the time. People make movies all the time without getting the permission of the descendants of the people who are having a movie shot about them. But Francis Ford Coppola thought to himself, apparently, that it was so important to get the family on board because then he could get help from the family, making sure he portrayed Tucker accurately. And one of the things that I've been struck by is I've spoken to members of the family and I've asked them specifically about the movie. Not the historical aspects of it, because that's easy enough to check with other places. But I said, how did they portray Preston Tucker personally? In other words, did he on screen, who was played by Jeff Bridges, did Jeff Bridges portray Preston Tucker in a way that was appropriate? And they've all said yes. And you have to understand how difficult that is to make a movie in Hollywood and have it come out to where the people who know the person in the movie go, yeah, that's him. And I've spoken to so many people who've seen movies about people they know and said, no, they got it wrong. And so Coppola, working with the family, got it right. And so he worked with the family, and I'm pretty sure it has a lot to do with this 4-page contract in my left hand. And so you have to understand there's 2 contracts in question. I do not have the other contract. But Coppola signed a contract with the people who held the rights to Tucker's likeness and so on, but then signed a supplementary contract with all of the family members who said, we will work with you so long as the other contract gets signed and so on. So there's 2 contracts dependent on each other. But the one I'm having in my hand here to talk about is an agreement entered into in 1977 by and between Coppola Cinema 7, and I'll just refer to that as Coppola, as the production company, and the children of Vera and Preston Tucker. So that'd be Preston Tucker Jr., Noble Tucker, John Tucker, Marilyn Lee McAndrew, formerly Marilyn Tucker. And then it says, said children of Vera Tucker and Preston Tucker Sr. are hereinafter jointly and severally referred to as the children. So working with the children here, and they sign this agreement, the other agreement gets signed, and then Coppola is going to make the movie. So you might go, what goes into this agreement? Well, 4 pages is short by modern contract standards, but it says, whereas Coppola is contemplating entering into a letter agreement with Vera, herein the principal agreement, wherein Vera Tucker will grant to Coppola certain rights in and to her name and likeness and the name and likeness of her husband, as such rights are more expressly set forth in that agreement, and wherein Coppola agrees to pay certain sums to Vera. And so that other agreement is simply between Coppola and Vera. And remember, if you've seen the movie, Preston Tucker is in the movie, as is Vera. And she was still around. And so she obviously had a concern making sure that she was portrayed accurately. But she obviously was very concerned about how her husband would be portrayed in the movie. So it then says, whereas the children desire to induce Coppola to enter into the principal agreement and to pay the sums to Vera Tucker, the parties hereby agree. 1, Coppola agrees that promptly upon execution hereof, it will enter into the principal agreement with Vera in the form previously transmitted to and approved by her and her attorney. So once the children sign this, the other contract gets signed also. The children hereby grants to Coppola, its successors, assigns, and licensees, the exclusive and irrevocable right, but not the obligation, to use the names, likenesses, or representations, or any simulation thereof, and the exclusive and irrevocable right to depict, portray, and represent any or all of them and their lives and all episodes, exploits, events, incidents whatsoever, and to dramatize or fictionalize them. So the children are saying, look, we understand the movie is about our dad and our mother, but you can also put us in there if you want to, and you can even fictionalize or dramatize the stories. And that's important because I'm sure you've heard that a lot of people, when they get invited onto a reality show, sign a contract that's usually about yay thick, and it often says things like, and we can dramatize this and turn the story around any way we want to and represent you any way we want to, et cetera, et cetera. And I've spoken to people who've refused to sign the contracts for fear of what could be done with their likeness once they sign that contract. I'm going to skip over some of the legalese, but paragraph 3, nothing contained in paragraph 2 or elsewhere shall be construed to be or to operate in derogation or prejudicial to any rights, licenses, privileges, or property which Coppola, its successors, assigns, and licensees may enjoy or be entitled to as a member of the public. So Coppola, like I said, could simply make this movie if he wanted to without anybody's permission and just say, well, public figures. And so, the children might be able to make an argument that he couldn't do that, but that's what he's resolving with this agreement here. It says here, the children hereby agree that they will not, prior to the date 10 years after the initial release of the motion picture based upon their father's life, or at any time thereafter during the initial exhibition, grant to or give any consent to or make any agreement with any other person regarding their likenesses and so on. So they're telling Coppola and agreeing, yeah, we'll work with you, but nobody else for at least a while. Paragraph 4, the children hereby release from and agree that they will not assert or maintain against Coppola, its successors, etc., any and all claims arising out of or in connection with said motion picture. And it then says that they are waiving any rights to make any claims about violations of civil rights statutes, invasion of privacy, right of publicity, defamation, libel, slander, statutory or otherwise, etc., etc. So they're saying that once they sign this agreement and their mom signs the other agreement and he makes a movie, they're not going to be able to come back and say, hey, I don't like the way you portrayed me, I'm going to sue you. The right's been waived right here. And then it says the provisions hereof shall be binding upon and for the benefit of each and all of the parties, respective heirs, executors, etc., all grants, covenants, releases, warranties, and representations entered into and made by the children hereunder are made for Coppola's express benefit and the benefit of Coppola's successors, etc., etc. Now it says, paragraph 7, and this is important, Coppola agrees that if the children are depicted in the motion picture based upon their father's life, any remake or sequel thereof, any television series or program based thereon, or any novel based upon their father's life, then the children will be depicted in a sympathetic manner. Because up until now, you may have asked yourself, why would you sign this agreement? You're not getting any money out of this. Now, you could say, well, obviously you're signing it to benefit your mother because she's going to get something out of the agreement she signs, apparently, right? But he's agreeing that he will portray them in a sympathetic manner. Now, obviously, they've already waived the right to sue him for slander, libel, or anything else, but putting this in writing would certainly help if he, in fact, breached the agreement by making them look bad. In the event that the foregoing covenant is broken, then the children shall be entitled to seek such money damages, if any, as they may actually suffer as a result of such breach. So they are allowed to sue Coppola if he portrays them badly. And it says that expressly right here, which I think is pretty impressive that he put that in there. Now, it does say, in no event shall they be entitled to rescind their rights granted herein or to seek an injunction. But it says here that as used herein, the term depict in a sympathetic manner means that such persons shall not be portrayed in a manner which would degrade such persons or subject such persons to scorn or ridicule in the eyes of the public. So he's saying right in writing, I'm going to make you guys not look bad, and if I do, you can sue me, even though I have you waiving other rights elsewhere. Paragraph 8, the children understand that the principal agreement provides for the depiction of the life of their father, and they hereby represent and warrant that to the best of their information and belief, their mother has the full right and authority to grant any and all rights to Coppola, which the children may have with regard to any use whatsoever of their father's name and likeness. The children hereby agree that they will not grant to or give any consent to or make any agreement with any other person, firm, or corporation, et cetera, like this one that they make with Coppola. So they're saying they have the exclusive right to do so as far as they know. Paragraph 9, and this is also important. Any representation or conclusion as to the demise of the Tucker automobile, other than capitalization and or management, shall be done solely at the initiative and risk of Coppola. In order to assist Coppola in the preparation of the treatment and or screenplay for such motion pictures, Preston Tucker Jr. agrees to grant Coppola access to all those items set forth in a list of personal memorabilia attached hereto. And I do not have a copy of that. But they had a ton of stuff of their dad's. And they told Coppola, if you make the film, we'll make this all available to you. And they had films, photographs, and personal effects. It says here that they will make this stuff available to Coppola, who will then get it back to them after the movie is over. Coppola represents and warrants that it is a California corporation, and this is pretty cool, and is currently producing the motion picture tentatively entitled Apocalypse Now. Now, here's the thing. This contract was signed by all the parties mentioned earlier, and then the mother signed, and the movie got made. But if you know the story of the making of Apocalypse Now, and if you don't, I encourage you to go watch the documentary Hearts of Darkness, which was shot by Coppola's wife during the filming of Apocalypse Now. It came out many years later, but it's fantastic. It's a brilliant, brilliant documentary. And the fact that Coppola was tied up in the making of Apocalypse Now while he was working on, and this, again, in Hollywood, because of the lead times on every project, it's not uncommon that you're working on one project, but lining up your next project. Makes complete sense. But he actually puts in here that he is a California corporation currently producing the motion picture tentatively titled Apocalypse Now. And so apparently, when he's dealing with people who are not Hollywood types, he's got to explain and make sure they understand that I'm a filmmaker and, just want to check my bona fides, as they say. I'm currently making a little picture called Apocalypse Now. When it comes out, you might hear about it. And so that's paragraph 11 in its entirety. Coppola hereby represents and warrants that it is a California corporation currently producing the motion picture tentatively entitled Apocalypse Now. And by the way, they did stick with that title in case you didn't remember. And then paragraph 12 says, Coppola hereby indemnifies the children in the manner and to the extent described in paragraph 14 of the principal agreement. Elsewhere in the principal agreement, the one that the mom is signing, is a statement that Coppola and his production company is going to indemnify the children in the making of this movie. So if somebody were to come forward later and say, I'm going to sue the kids for letting that movie get made, Coppola will step in and defend that. And then I'm looking at the signature page here, and it bears the signatures of Preston Tucker Jr., Marilyn Lee McAndrew, Noble Tucker, John Tucker, and Francis Coppola, president of Coppola CC7, which is the name of the company. So I thought that's pretty cool. I've never seen a Hollywood contract before like that, and I thought that was a fascinating thing. So I would hope that you found it as interesting as I did. I'm going to let you know right now, though, that the 75th anniversary of the Tucker automobile rolling off the assembly line is going to be celebrated at the AACA Museum in Hershey, Pennsylvania. AACA Museum, very, very cool museum. That museum, in many respects, has become like the spiritual center for all things Tucker, because they've got a couple very important Tuckers on display there, and a lot of other stuff donated to the museum by people in the community. And so if you wanted to go, I want to go someplace and see Tucker, learn about Tucker, and look at some cars, the best place to go would be the AACA Museum. And they are going to have a big event in June. So I'm going to mention this, and I know some people right now are going, Steve, this sounds like you're plugging something because you're involved in it. Well, I am. They contacted me a long time ago and said, hey, Steve, we're putting together a 75th anniversary exhibit and like gala weekend to celebrate the 75th anniversary of that vehicle. And I said, okay, that sounds cool. And they said, well, would you want to come out and give a presentation? I said, I'd love to. They said, well, do you have any ideas about what you could talk about? And I said, sure, I've got some, but is there anything you're thinking? And my good friend Mark Lieberman is heavily involved in this museum. And he's also a Tucker expert. He's the guy who runs Nostalgic Motoring over there and found me my Viper. But Mark actually currently owns a Tucker. And he's owned 5 or 6 in his life. And he's also done restoration work on a whole bunch of others. He is one of the most knowledgeable on the Tucker automobile alive today, without question, no question. So Mark said, I think it might be fun if you talked about the legal aspects of Tucker's story. And I said, that's a good topic, because many people do know that he's put on trial, and that's obviously a major focal point of the movie. But that's just one of the 3 big legal things in Tucker's career. I said, number 1 is the criminal trial. Number 2 was the bankruptcy that his company was pushed into. And that is an interesting story also, not the least of which is because it actually happened in the same building he was being tried in at the same time. So at one point in time, in theory, there were 2 courtrooms in the same building in Chicago. One of them prosecuting Tucker, where he eventually was found not guilty, and one of them dissolving the Tucker Corporation. And the third legal action he was involved in that many people don't know about is that when he was exonerated, he sued some of the people who slandered him for slander and libel. And those actions, unfortunately, wound up going away later on because Tucker passed away before they got to trial. However, they're fascinating in the stuff that he dug up during those lawsuits. So I'm going to do a presentation about the legal aspects of all of that. Other people are putting on other presentations of important things. There's going to be a big dinner, and they're also going to show the movie at a local theater, and a whole bunch of, it's a whole weekend. It's a whole weekend. So if you're in the area of like central Pennsylvania, near Hershey, take a look at this. Or if you simply like Tuckers and you're within driving distance, depending on what you consider driving distance, take a look at this. I'll put a link to the AACA Museum in the description below. And I would urge you to take a look at that because, among other things, there's going to be a special exhibition. And the exhibition, and it's short term, not all this stuff will be there forever, will include many of the actual Tucker automobiles. Now remember, they built 51, but only 47 of them remain, basically, right? On display will be the Tin Goose 1001, which is the 75th anniversary of that car coming off the assembly line, 1015, 1022, 1026, 1028, 1044, 1048, and 1050. So if those cars are there, which they should be, 9 of the 47 will be in the same location. You have no idea how unusual that is. So it's a very, very cool thing, and they're going to fire them up and drive some of them around. They're not going to fire them all up. Just be careful. Be careful here. I don't want to make any promises that we can't keep, but they're all going to be on display, and they will fire some of them up and drive them around, and you can see them running and backing up, which is inside joke. And you can also then see the upgrades to the Kamek Tucker Gallery, along with the original test chassis. And all of these things are extremely important to the story. So if you've seen the movie, you know what most of this is about. If you've read my book, you would know what this is all about. But again, my book's Preston Tucker's Battle to Build a Car of Tomorrow. Came out a couple of years ago. I will be selling and signing these books at that event also. But I think it's going to be a pretty cool thing. And I've had a couple other things I've written books about have anniversaries. So like the Italian Hall disaster, the centennial, the 100th anniversary of that was in 2013. And so I went up north to the area where it happened, and there was a bunch of different events that happened. And I'm glad I got to take a part in them, just because it was an opportunity for a lot of people to get together and say, well, if this is the time that we can do it, it makes sense to do it now. So the 75th anniversary of the Tucker automobile rolling down the assembly line. And there you go. So also got to thank Preston Tucker's Speed Shop. And that is another YouTube channel run by some guys closely connected to the community. So check out Preston Tucker's Speed Shop. And of course, check out my good friend Mark Lieberman at Nostalgic Motoring. I'll put links to both of those in the description below the video. And like I said, it's a 75th anniversary, big brouhaha at Hershey at the AACA Museum. And if you can stop on by, well, I'll be there and talking to people and checking out all the Tuckers. Questions or comments, put them below. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Minimalism isn't about removing things you love. It's about removing the things that distract you from the things you love.